occult traditions, again, particularly of Britain and Europe, they used to call that the planes, the etheric planes. And, that the word dimensions wasn't really in use at that time, certainly not in occult literature. And dimensions, in my understanding of it, is a slightly more neutral word, because if you say etheric planes to people, a lot of people are going to switch off or struggle with that. Similarly, if you go back to even older texts, Gnostic texts and pre-Christian texts, they will talk of the heavens, and there are like 7 levels of heavens. But really, as you put your mind across these things, you can sense in a broad way what we're talking about here is dimensions. So the spirit really is able to straddle all those things at the same time. So it exists in a higher dimensional space, and it connects us right now, as we listen, as we talk, to what we're doing to our bodies. And we can say that probably quite a lot of listeners are familiar with the idea of quantum entanglement, whereby 2 quanta that have had entanglement at any point retain that relationship. And you can measure the spin of those 2 different things to determine that they're connected. And whether they're 1 inch apart or millions of miles apart, that is instantaneous communication. And that's interesting because it breaks down the apparently classical kind of Newtonian Cartesian physics that says nothing can go faster than light, which is evidently not so at the quantum level. And similarly, spirit kind of cuts through the usual space-time restrictions in this way. So we could say from a metaphysical angle that spirit exists in this higher dimension. So once we model that, we don't have to accept it or believe it or disbelieve it. Let us just hypothesize and model that for a moment. That is why spirit can see our whole life path. It can see the moment of birth and the moment of transition and everything in between. So as you understand this and bring it into the daily experience of your life, you see that so-called ESP and extrasensory phenomena of all different kinds make more sense in that way, because what you're doing is you are allowing mind to merge with spirit in a more fluid way. And if spirit has complete access to your life sphere, it appears to us, who are restrained in the timeline, the temporal 3D plane, that it can see into the future, or it can see previous to our own birth. If you're in spirit, or if you're a higher dimensional entity, that is no big deal. That's just the way it is. So we could say this: the interface between spirit and brain is mind. And mind is very much to do with potential and to do with imagination. And it's what I call our kind of holographic imaginal palette. And when we purify that and discipline it and exercise it just like any other kind of muscle in a way, we begin to understand that we can directly shape and modify, and in some cases completely rewrite our reality. And we can go into these elements later on, I guess, but for now, let us say that for mind to operate smoothly and in equilibrium with spirit and brain, we have to kind of charge it, and we charge it through, to an extent, clearing the room of all the debris and all the objects and giving it a space to breathe and a space to accumulate this kind of psychic charge. And in the classical way, one technique for that, of course, is to meditate, is to clear mind, is to become present, and in so doing, just slow down all the other chatter and so on. And even in that very simple experience of a 5 or 25-minute meditation, spirit is able, higher self is able to move into mind. And when we do that, we open up the reality structure in a much more profound way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have an old saying here that we're multidimensional beings existing on a vibrational continuum. And, if you want to run around just thinking you're a body and a personality, that's fine. But, why limit yourself to that? And
well, that's right.
Yeah, clear out all those old wounds and traumas, in your mental and emotional body. Your access to spirit is going to be so thin that, you really have to get back to some kind of process-oriented therapy or something else, or like you're saying, meditation, to move through those old wounds and traumas, before you can have any kind of clear access to that higher consciousness and energy.
It is, certainly. The way I see it is that spirit, the good news is that spirit, higher self, etc., is always there. It's always present. Our signal, if you like, our connection to it, just kind of like an internet connection. If it's very thin, very low bandwidth, and it's always dropping out and there's a lot of static, it feels like one is separate from the world. And the things that create static are kind of like filters we put in place, like self and ego and brain, and even personality to some extent. And the more those things dominate in mind, the more separate we feel, and events in our lives appear random, and the narratives in our lives appear chaotic, and all the people and objects and events and stuff just kind of bubble up from a seemingly decoherent set of phenomena. And it's when we think like that, and if we were to be really fundamentalist, materialist science about it, if you take that to its logical conclusion, then the universe really is just this big, cold, empty realm that has no real interest or, emotional connection to humans, to Homo sapiens. It doesn't really matter. We might as well just flicker in and out of existence without being noticed. And if you completely detach yourself from your higher dimensional self, then that is your reality. And for those who choose not to determine their own participation in reality, they are effectively disowning their own creative potential, their own responsibilities, and renouncing this inner work. So what I try and do in my writings and speaking and so on and teaching is give people kind of some level of understanding of this. And once people really get an inner feeling for it, it is a universal thing. It's not localized in certain special individuals. It's there in everybody. The only thing that certain people have is an ability to remove these synthetic filters much more kind of speedily than others. And once you do that, you can perceive it in people who do that a mile off. You can feel it when you look at them before they even open the mouth. You can see that this particular individual, whether they're articulate and eloquent or whether they're none of those things and they just literally walk into the room, you can feel it because spirit resonates with spirit. And that is why some people feel so positive, so affirmative, and this critical thing of bliss and of joy is what naturally transpires when we achieve that balance. And that is a universal communication medium for everybody. Everybody wants a bliss and serenity in their life. And it arises through balance. It is not, as many people probably are already aware, it's not a pursuit in itself to seek that thing. It is a byproduct of function to some extent. When you are walking your Dharma, when you are on your path on a day-to-day basis, no matter what your circumstances are, everybody is capable of that, then this serenity and this joy naturally surfaces, and a lot of the obstacles in life begin to just dissolve a little bit more freely and supportively, and we find that we can, connect with things at a kind of deeper level. And everything that we do, our homes, our relationships, our intelligence, our passions, and so on, become charged with this, and this psychic element, and using that in just the classical term of psyche as of mind, not as anything, particularly mystical. That psychic charge means that we are capable of achieving so much more. So the punchline, if you like, to all this kind of this dialogue of mine is that when you do it, life just gets better. And if you are focusing your energies on some of the more interesting phenomena in life, like the mystical experiences, the extraterrestrial contact, and so on, you have to do this inner work for that to take place. And as I've heard you say, James, it is our responsibility to raise our consciousness if we do seek particularly contact. Mm-hmm. It's not their responsibility to kind of come to our level, because we have to be clear and we have to be balanced to accept that kind of phenomena in our life. Otherwise, it could kind of tip us over the edge. So it's kind of like a safeguard threshold, really, I guess, from their perspective.
It does. I've noticed that, I've seen people out in the field here say, come down, I'm ready, I want to get on the ship, and they're out there just saying, and then I saw this one ship drop down, and it powered up and lit up the whole sky above us, and that woman ran and grabbed a tree and was just totally freaking out, and I said, I don't think you're ready yet. You haven't mastered your fear yet, and a few other things. And I know some of these beings, their frequencies are so high. I mean, they've dropped the base emotions. They don't have the jealousy, the ownership, or greed, or separation these programs are running. And when I first had my contact, they told me that. They said that, you have a lot of work to do, before you come and really hang out with us. But, we'll help you, inspire you along the way, and help point you in the right direction and things of that nature. But we're not going to do everything for you. And I see so many people out there thinking that that these beings are all here to just come and save them and pull them out of their own self-created realities, and they're their soulmate, and they're going to be happy when this ET lands and steps off the ship and says, "Hi, honey, come to the Pleiades with me." I hear that all the time, and I know you probably run into this one I find fascinating too, is that there's this it's the, I'm trying to think of a name for it, but it's kind of like that spiritual look, on people's face. It's kind of a spiritual smugness, and I am spiritual. I am so enlightened. I do my yoga every morning. I eat my goji beans and meditate, and I'm superior.
Yes.
It's kind of a superior stance. It's really interesting, and they have all the words. They say all the right thing, but I love what you're saying. They're not authentic. They're not. No. They haven't dealt with their stuff yet.
Yeah. That's right. I mean, this inner work is a lifelong process. It doesn't suddenly click one day and you have this kind of Zen Kensho experience and then that's it. It's a lifelong unfoldment, really. And as I said earlier, that people are very cunning, and I do this too. Everybody does it to some extent in displacing the inner work, and people displace it with quick fixes like food and shopping and going out and watching movies and sports and so on, but also more sort of socially acceptable fixes like careers and devoting yourself to other people and religious devotion and cultural immersion. All those things displace the inner work, because anything that demands massive mental energy, whether it's mental or sensory, effectively kind of relegates the potential of you doing the inner work into just background noise, because you're too damn busy, basically. So people will delay this thing until they get the new job, or until they've moved, or until they've lost 30 pounds, or until the kids leave home. And, to some extent, I've studied this as well, that people also use dysfunction to defer the inner work. So they'll even maintain an element of dysfunction in their life to drown out the need to do the inner work. So as well as on the positive side, I meditate for 6 hours a day, and like you say, eat my goji berries and all the rest of it. Those are good things in themselves.
Oh yeah.
But they're neutral. But when they constitute the sort of total focus of somebody's energies, that's when problems start to arise. So on the flip side of that, people also do the negative